Cleveland, Ohio, 1933. A woman named Ruth kept a coffee can under the kitchen floorboard. Not for hiding money exactly, though there was money in it. For record keeping. Every week she wrote on a slip of paper what came in and what went out, folded it, and put it in the can with the cash. The bank her family had used since 1921 had closed the previous February and never reopened. The money they had left in it was simply gone. She did not go hungry. She did not lose the house. She did not ask for charity, though it was 3 blocks away at the church hall. What she had was a system, not from a book, from her mother, her neighbors, and 17 years of watching what happened when you ignored the parts that mattered. Number 9 is what modern financial advisors call a breakthrough. Ruth was doing it with a dime a week in 1933. Number 5 is what the banking industry specifically does not want you thinking about. And number 1 was never a trick at all. Let's count it down. Before we start, subscribe if you're new here. This channel covers what got lost, what it cost us, and what's worth bringing back. The next one is worth staying for. Number 15, the envelope system. Before budgeting apps and automatic transfers, Depression households managed money with physical envelopes. Rent, food, coal, doctor. Each category got an envelope. Each payday, cash was divided and placed. When an envelope was empty, that category stopped, not slowed. No shifting funds. If the coal envelope ran out, you wore more sweaters. The system worked because it made abstraction concrete. A bank balance is a number on paper. An empty envelope is a physical fact. It didn't require prosperity. It required discipline. Number 14, buying ugly. Depression. Families bought food by price, not appearance. Day-old bread cost half. Overripe fruit cost a quarter of peak price and made better preserves anyway. Irregular vegetables, split tomatoes, knobby carrots, cabbage with outer leaves browned were sold at the back of markets for almost nothing. Ugly meant cheap. Cheap meant the money went further. They preserved the excess and ate nothing they couldn't finish. Number 13, the 30-day rule. If you wanted something that wasn't a necessity, you waited 30 days before spending the money. In practice, this meant writing the item down and coming back to it a month later. Most of the time, 30 days changed the answer. The thing didn't seem necessary anymore, or you'd simply forgotten why you wanted it. This wasn't delayed gratification as a virtue. It was a forced test of whether a desire was real. By the 1920s, advertising had become a full science of manufactured want. Depression. Families learned that 30 days was long enough to tell the difference between a need and an impulse. What comes next is the practice that looks obsessive and turned out to be the most accurate financial tool most families owned. Number 12, the household ledger. Every cent in, every cent out, written down the same day it moved. Not reviewed weekly, not estimated. Every cent, the same day. Ruth's coffee can slips weren't sentiment. They were an accounting system. Depression-era financial writing consistently named ledger keeping as the foundation every other practice depended on, because it destroyed the fictions people told themselves about where the money went. Most people estimate their monthly spending wrong by 30 to 40%. Not because they're lying, because the money moved through categories nobody was watching. The ledger watched everything. Number 11, the neighborhood economy. Money that stayed in the neighborhood so altered clothes for a neighbor who kept a garden, who traded vegetables for a neighbor who did minor didn't leave. Depression communities built dense informal barter networks. A woman who could carpentry, who fixed something for the seamstress. The labor moved in circles and cash barely touched was too scarce to meet. Sociologist Robert Lind, in his 1937 follow-up to Mid It, nobody called it charity. It was a parallel economy covering needs that Castletown found these exchange networks had expanded dramatically between 1925 and 1935, and the entire philosophy of what food is actually for. Number 10, Stockpot culture. Nothing left the Depression kitchen without being used completely. Bones made broth. broth made soup. Soup extended for days with whatever grew in the garden or cost least at market. Vegetable trimmings went into the pot. Fat was rendered. Bread that hardened became breadcrumbs or thickener. The stockpot sat on the back of the stove and accepted everything. This was not a cooking technique. It was a philosophy. A thing has not been fully used until there is nothing left to use. The USDA estimated in 1933 that households practicing full food utilization spent 15 to 20% less than households of equivalent income who didn't. The difference wasn't what they bought, it was what they didn't throw away. Number 9. Pay yourself first. Ruth put a dime in the coffee can before she paid anything else. Not after rent, not after food. Before, even in months where it couldn't be a dime, even when it was a nickel. Financial advisors rediscovered this in the 1980s and charged to teach it. During the Depression, it was a counterintuitive act. Saving when money was visibly short felt almost irrational. What it did was establish savings as non-negotiable, a first obligation, not a surplus. Families who practiced it had measurably higher asset levels a decade later than families of equivalent income who did not. Something worth naming. Before we continue, every trick on this list requires slowing down decisions, slowing down spending, slowing down the pace at which resources leave the household. The Depression imposed this through scarcity. It didn't ask. What's uncomfortable is the implication. These behaviors are available to anyone at any income level. Most people don't practice them, not because they don't work, because nothing is forcing the slowdown. And, absent that force, these practices feel optional. Optional things don't last. Number 8. No debt overnight. The rule was simple. No debt should carry past the end of the month. If you borrowed from a neighbor, from a store's credit ledger, from the informal lending that threaded through Depression communities, you paid it before the month closed. The debt didn't roll. It ended. This wasn't moralism. It was mathematics. Compounding interest transfers wealth from borrowers to lenders for as long as the debt exists. Depression families had watched banks fail and savings disappear. They understood what it meant when a financial institution held power over your accounts. Long debt turned the borrower into a permanent source of income for someone else. They kept it short. Number 7. Use it up, wear it out. Use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without. The phrase predates the Depression, a New England saying revived with full seriousness in 1933. It meant exactly what it said. Clothes were worn until they couldn't be repaired and then cut into rags. Shoes were resoled until the uppers gave out. Nothing was replaced while it could still function. The modern economy runs on the opposite logic. Products are designed to require replacement. Repair is priced above replacement to make disposal rational. Depression families would have recognized this immediately as a transfer of their resources to someone else's account, and they rejected it. Number 6. Grow something. Any land was a food source. Window boxes grew herbs. Vacant lots became community gardens. Backyards that had been lawns turned into vegetable plots. By 1943, the USDA estimated victory gardens were producing 40% of American vegetables, an infrastructure Depression families had built out of necessity a decade earlier. A family with a garden had food security that cash couldn't replicate, because cash required a functioning market, and markets were not always functioning. Number 5. Never trust one container. Depression families who had bank accounts in 1929 watched those accounts vanish as banks failed in waves before federal deposit insurance existed. The FDIC wasn't created until 1933. Before that, a bank failure meant the money was simply gone. The lesson was precise. Never hold everything in one place. Cash at home. A small account if the bank seemed stable. A postal savings account. The U.S. Post Office offered federally backed accounts until 1967. The families who had diversified survived bank failures. The families who hadn't, didn't. What comes next has nothing to do with individual behavior. and it may be the most powerful item on this list. Number 4. The Mutual Aid Society. Before government safety nets, communities insured each other. Mutual aid societies, fraternal organizations, ethnic associations, religious cooperatives pooled small contributions and paid out in emergencies, illness, death, sudden job loss. By 1930, thousands of them covered millions of families. The principle was simple. Risk distributed across a community is smaller than risk held by an individual. Inside a mutual aid network, a family facing a medical emergency paid a manageable share of someone else's crisis, knowing others would cover a manageable share of theirs. When Social Security arrived in 1935, it formalized what these networks had been running for generations. Many societies dissolved. The function survived. The structure did not. Number 3. Buy when nobody else can. The counterintuitive move. Depression. Families with any capital bought assets while prices were crashed. Land that cost $40 an acre in 1926 cost $8 in 1933. Farms sold for back taxes. Equipment went at fractions of value. Families who had any cash and the nerve to deploy it acquired assets that returned 10 to 20 times over the following decades. Nothing is more counterintuitive than buying when the economic news is uniformly catastrophic. But Depression families who had studied previous panics understood that low prices were temporary and assets were permanent. They bought land, not luxury, function, not comfort. The next one built on this. And it's the reason most Depression-era families that made it through left something their grandchildren still have. Number 2. More than one way to earn. No Depression family that understood risk relied on a single income. The household produced. A woman who could sew took in alterations. A man with a truck hauled things on weekends. Children ran errands. Gardens produced surplus that was traded or sold. This was not hustle culture. It was risk management. If your primary income vanished, and in the Depression, any income could vanish without warning, a family with one source had nothing. A family with 4 small sources might lose one and still eat. You did not know which would fail. You arranged your life so that no single failure could take everything. Number 1. The concept of enough. The hardest trick on this list has no technique attached to it. Depression families knew what enough was, not as a limit they chafed against, as a genuine finish line. The house that kept the rain out, the food that kept hunger away, the clothes that kept the cold off. Enough was a known quantity, not a moving target. This is the thing the consumer economy most requires you to never arrive at. Continuous consumption depends on enough never being enough, on desire always exceeding what you have, so that money keeps moving from you to someone else. Depression families had desire. They weren't ascetics, but they'd seen what happened when people confused want with need, when they spent against a future that didn't arrive. They built on something more reliable, what they actually had, and the discipline to make it last. Ruth's coffee can, when her children cleaned out the house in 1971, still had slips of paper in it. The most recent was from 1962. Nobody counted what those slips recorded. But the house was paid off. The children went to college. And her daughter, asked later what her mother had taught her about money, said something that stayed with me. She said, "She taught me that enough is a decision you make, not something that happens to you." That's the whole list. Drop a comment with which one surprised you most. I read every one.